already mentioned the notion of rules. The notion of rules was a very strong theme that came out in the conversations that I had. I'll let you have a quick look at that. Now, there's a number of things going on in these two quotes. One of the most obvious ones is alcohol. This is probably one of the most prominent themes in the whole narrative. I think we'll just go back here briefly. We've got alcohol there somewhere. Number 8 there, next, just under control. Oh, we've gone back to there. Okay, so it was number 8 in the narrative hit parade, and It was a constant refrain that people were saying, look, I'm tired of going out in the street and stepping over pools of vomit. I don't want to wake up in the wrong bed. I don't want to get into a fight or have someone try and fight me, this sort of thing. And so people were making this kind of reasoned choice about their preferred substance. Okay? They were also talking about intoxication in general, and so they were suggesting that it's okay to be intoxicated, but I want to be intoxicated in a way that's okay for me, and so that's these are some of the themes that were coming through there, and they again it added for them, I think it added a sense of validity to the previous quote where the person was talking about how, well, yeah, technically I'm a criminal, but I actually behave pretty well. I mean, look at these guys; they're all on the piss. So, although I have to say that a significant proportion of people, drank as well, but for many of these people, cannabis was their preferred substance. This quote here just brings us back again to the notion of rules, but also the idea of the fact that these people are making rational choices. They're not simply having something because it's there. They're using a substance having thought about it and having thought about the consequences of it as well. And again, there are implications here for everything from in relation to harm minimisation in terms of things like, well, educating people about use and perhaps allowing a degree of it, so without trying to create an environment where people don't actually have that choice because they apparently can't make that choice. Well, they're saying, look, I can make a choice, and this is the choice I've made, and it's my right to make that choice. These two quotes are interesting because they represent polarity, I suppose, in this moving towards the notion of personhood in a way. But it's also dealing with risk, except the risk that's involved here is the risk of discovery. And there's one person who's saying that they actually don't care. Well, they're not saying they don't care. They feel that it's part of them. They feel they should be allowed to do it. And they're not ashamed. The other person, on the other hand, feels quite strongly that they don't want other people to know about their activities. And in fact, this person had kept her secret from just about everybody she knew for many, many years. And she'd smoked for almost 30 years, or used cannabis for almost 30 years, and felt very strongly that she didn't want people to know about her, and so one can imagine the type of impact that has on one's life. Just a note, I've included in these descriptions of the people here this notion, this dependent, as in cannabis dependent as opposed to dependent on something else, and I did that deliberately because that is a very powerful descriptor. As I've said before, it's got a very strong emotional component to it, and people have different responses to that, but of course, if you look at this one here, this person's dependent, obviously they're wrestling with that, but maybe they just have reasons for that relate to being stigmatised, to having opinions made about them that they feel don't actually conform to who they are. So the notion of risk and rules related not only to the kind of direct harms associated with cannabis use, but also the risks of discovery and how those might relate to you as a person. And similarly, I'll let you guys read this first. The work one was an interesting one, and it tended to be mediated to some extent by the types of work that people did. And there were a range of people from professional people teaching and working in health through to tradespeople, self-employed people, students, the whole range, parents, and to some extent, especially for example in relation to work, people's rules were mediated by the type of work they did. This guy was great. He was one of the most articulate people in the study. He was fantastic. He said that his preferred method of use was spotting, and he was very proud of the fact that he had once and he always did 3 spots for people, and it was always in order. And the most that he'd ever done was for 30 people, in one go. So he delivered 90 spots, and no one missed out, and everyone was in order. And so so much for amotivation and just control. So the idea here is that people have different ideas. Now there were a number of tradespepeople in the study. There were a couple of carpenters and there were a couple of painters. The painters smoked, the carpenters didn't smoke. And they both, I mean, it's only very small numbers and you can't really infer a lot from that, but I'm going to anyway. And the carpenters, their idea was, well, you're carting around skill saws and you've got where's my pencil, where's my, But the painters, they're just focusing on the lines and they're just getting everything right. Probably also there's an element of substance use in the context of painting as a trade. I mean, the fumes and so on. I'm not being totally facetious there. I suspect that might be part of it, but certainly it didn't seem to be a problem for this guy, or in fact for his employers, as we can see in that case. Which the fact that his boss was supplying him, and they'd go up to the mansion after work and get the knives going again. This is personhood or identity, and this just brings out the notion of the heterogeneity of the sample, how everybody had different ideas about themselves in relation to cannabis. The first quote's interesting. That person was the only quit user in the study. He'd had a very negative experience with cannabis when he was overseas, and he'd felt that it really wasn't for him. And so a lot of his narrative was quite negative, was couched in quite negative terms, whereas the other people were generally very, very enthusiastic about the use of cannabis, and as a consequence you tend to get these more positive perceptions of it, although at the same time, you've got someone there saying, well, it's not really a big deal for me. It's just something that I do, every now and then. There's other people who are right into it. The last person there was the youngest member of the study. She had recently been smoking for a year, and she was very keen on it. She liked it. She liked what it did, and she didn't really like to be around people who were giving her a hard time about it. This last quote basically is quite interesting in a sense, because one of the classic pieces of data that you typically see with cannabis use is this sort of curve of early use, peak use, and then dropping off again. And the idea that for some people it's kind of a rite of passage and they're going to do it. And so again, this engages with notions of dependence and so on. The idea that you're getting into a substance that's going to be this really big deal and a really bad thing that's going to lead you elsewhere. For a lot of people, it's the natural history of their life's use or their career of cannabis use is one that just goes through this kind of bell curve.